Welcome everybody to Thursday Book Club. It's an exciting book club this month and this day because we've got Emily Bitto as our guest. I'm coming to you from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. So as for everyone else who's coming in, we'll be recording the session as usual. Switch off your video if you don't want your face to be shown, and if everybody could mute so that we can hear better. For those of you who are new to Thursday Book Club, it's what I call the most relaxed book club I could think of. So the idea was it's online, it's for half an hour when we have a guest, maybe 45 minutes. So it's enough to get to know each other, not too much to wreck your night if you've got something else going on. And we don't have books that we we have to read every week, but people come with what they've read for the week and give recommendations. Once a month we have a guest, and over that month we showcase the guest in the newsletter, so you've got a chance to read the books, and if not, then you get an introduction to the book so that you can go and get the books afterwards. So it's if you'd like to be part of the newsletter and to get the tidbits of what we've been doing, just sign up on my website, which is suzanne@suzanneleal.com. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Suzanne Leal, and I'm the author of 3 novels, most recently The Deceptions and The Teacher's Secret. Tonight, before I introduce you to Emily, we've got an apology. Tom Keneally was keen to join us today, but he's at the rugby and can't make it tonight, unfortunately. He tells me he gets tickets to the whenever Manly plays, and that's where he and his wife are. But he said, and I quote, "Give my warmest regards to Bitto. She writes like an angel."
Oh, that's nice.
And in breaking news, Tom will be my guest in September, so I hope to see you all back then, and also for our guests in between time. Before I say a proper hi to Emily, let me tell you a little bit about her. She's many things. Most of interest to us on Thursday Book Club is that she's the author of 2 novels that have been greatly acclaimed. First, The Strays, which won the 2015 Stella Prize, as well as the Tina Kane Award, the University of Canberra Book of the Year, and many, many shortlistings. Wild Abandon is Emily's second book, which was published last year. And as I'm discussing Wild Abandon, Emily has the book there, which she will show us all because it's a beautiful cover. And so far, it's been shortlisted for the Australian Booksellers Industry Awards and the Australian Literature Society Medal. So we're looking forward to hearing about more. Are there more awards that I've missed as yet, or are they still to come, Emily?
There was actually one that was announced yesterday, but I can't remember the name. This is quite embarrassing. I will get back to you.
Thank you very much. So watch this space. Another reason for signing up to the newsletter, when Emily will be able to tell us exactly what
I'm going to tell you now. It is called the Margaret and Colin Roderick Literary Award.
Oh, that's terrific. Roderick Award. That's great. And so you've been the shortlist has come out.
Long list at this stage. Yeah, it was just announced.
See, I pride myself on being up to the minute, but you've beaten me. So well done. You heard it here first. Emily is on the long list for the Roderick Award. Wild Abandon. That's the book we're going to talk about mostly tonight, but also a little bit about writing in general. So it's really quite the ride, Wild Abandon. We land in New York City and then suddenly, or perhaps not so suddenly, find ourselves in the deep American heartland of Ohio. For me, it was essentially the story of Will. And just for those people who haven't read it, or even for those of us who have, who's Will for you? Tell me a bit about Will, Emily.
Well, Will is a sort of how would I describe him? He's a heartbroken young Australian guy. He's only 23. He's just gone through his first devastating breakup. He's been dumped by his girlfriend, the first kind of love, and he's basically just sort of blown his life up and gone overseas, just sort of fled the country. He's a guy that grew up in a small town, a country town, and he's moved to Melbourne to study, and he's kind of a bit ashamed of his origins. This is his first trip overseas. He's simultaneously kind of, well, he's trying to escape his suffering, but he's also sort of trying to, you know, go on a bit of a quest. What he's ultimately looking for is to kind of become cool, to sort of go to what he sees as the sort of center of the universe, the heart of culture in New York City, and he just wants to kind of have an experience that will enable him to kind of come home a new man, someone who has great stories, who has traveled, who's seen the world, and who is like not as kind of shamefully self-conscious as he currently is, basically.
And look, I don't quite know how to say this, Emily, but sort of annoyed me.
Oh yeah. I mean,
do he annoy you or do you love him?
I love him, but yeah, I mean, I think he's, you know, I mean, I was probably pretty annoying at the age of 22, 23. Maybe not quite as annoying as Will, but he's struggling. He's crippled by sort of self-consciousness, and just this kind of lack of self-esteem. I guess he's sort of, for me, in a way, he kind of stands for something about, you know, that idea of the kind of Australian cultural cringe as well. Like, he's very much enamored by American culture, and sort of thinks of at least his own hometown as somewhere that kind of has no culture, and he desperately wants to sort of come into contact with cool people and places and become sort of magically transformed.
And he's mortified by his parents in particular.
Yeah.
What do his parents done to deserve or not deserve his
not deserve? Yeah. Well, his mother's sort of a conservative, religious woman, you know, just, you know, nothing sort of awful at all, just a kind of normal, ordinary person. But he, you know, I think he sort of really suffers from having moved to, you know, the city, the big smoke in Melbourne, and come into contact with a whole bunch of sort of cool young people who are in bands and working in cafes and bars and things. And so he sort of suddenly realized that his upbringing and his kind of origins are desperately sort of uncool. He doesn't know how to act around people, and he sort of projected his sense of kind of not being good enough onto his parents and sort of blaming them, I guess. And then his dad is everything he doesn't want to turn out like, because his dad sort of went on a you know, an early overseas trip when he was, you know, in his kind of probably early 20s to London. And then essentially what happened was he found out that he'd kind of got Will's mother pregnant, and he came home and sort of did the right thing, but never traveled again. But he's still going on and on about his sort of one overseas trip, and Will really sort of thinks that that's pretty pathetic, and he wants to become a man of the world and will not be this person that's only been overseas once and still talking about it however many years later.
And without giving anything away, he does his best to become a man of the world with mixed results when he's
very mixed.
And then he gets the hell out of New York and goes into the heartland of America, where he drops in on Tamsin, who's a school friend from Australia who now lives in America. And through Tamsin, he finds himself at a place called Wayne's Wild Kingdom. What's Wayne's Wild Kingdom?
So Wayne is a guy that Tamsin's husband works for, and he is a sort of troubled, fast-living Vietnam vet, and he has a vast collection of exotic animals, a private zoo, basically. if any of you have seen the show Tiger King, you will get the picture. Unfortunately, that came out as I was writing this book, or maybe fortunately, because I think it also kind of, it sort of gives Australian readers the sense of like what this world is all about. It was kind of a world that I sort of stumbled on, this world of kind of exotic animal ownership, and I just felt like it was beyond belief that Australian readers wouldn't even believe that this happened in real life, but yes, it does.
That's it's interesting when you were saying that you were writing concurrently when this tiger city comes up, and like you say, I mean, is someone going to steal your thunder, or does it make the audience much more interested in the area? The example I was going to give you, where you know, that when people say, oh well, it could be worse, a friend of mine, her ex-boyfriend, I think, it was a film director, and wrote a film about Princess Diana, a comedy. Diana, but just the day it was to be released, she died.
Oh no.
She died. So they had this fabulously comedic film about this you know, icon, and then she dies, and so it had to be completely
scrapped. Oh, that's awful. So they'd actually made it.
That actually made it, and it was my understanding. Look, I may be exaggerating. I don't think so. I think it was almost the day of release, and
that would be devastating.
Well, exactly. So I'm thinking Tiger City's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But have you found that people have interviewed you or asked you about Tiger City without you raising it? Is that a...
Yeah, I think I guess it's kind of brought that whole world into sort of mainstream culture, whereas it was a total sort of just strange discovery for me when I was writing the book. Or the sort of seed that kind of was behind the origin of the book was a news story that I read about a different guy from that person, but who had, I mean, there was actually a lot of private zoos in Ohio back in that period. They've sort of changed quite a lot of the laws now, but it was legal to own as many exotic animals as you wanted to back in 2011. Yeah.
So just before we leave Wayne, give me an example of what animals he has there.
So he has, I think something like 50 something animals, 18 tigers, 15 lions. He's got some bears, a panther, wolves, primates, anything you can dream of, basically.
So at the time, people could just say, you know what, I don't want a dog and a cat. I'd prefer 15 lions. And as long as you could source them, that's all fine.
As long as you didn't transport them over state bound borders or charge money to sort of publicly exhibit them, you could have as many as you want. Yeah, totally insane.
What I found interesting too is that you're in Melbourne. We've just gone through obviously a couple of years of pandemic, and yet the book is set in America. Was it difficult? I suppose, first of all, were you writing the book from Melbourne about America, or how did you manage to research the book?
Well, by the time the pandemic hit, I was already sort of in the kind of late editing sort of stage. So it was a long time in the writing this book, because I opened a bar sort of 6 months after my first book came out, and then I lost 2 years of writing time running a bar, which is where I came across a lot of young Australian men that I sort of eavesdropped on their conversations. Not that they are anything like Will, they're a lot more cool and sure of themselves than Will, but yeah, so I really started writing this book probably in earnest about 2016, late 2016, 2017. And I did go to the US around that time and spent some time in New York. And then I did go to Ohio, and already by that stage, a lot of the kind of animal ownership laws had changed. But I spent some time at this sort of a sanctuary that had a lot of animals that had been either sort of surrendered or rescued from private owners. So that was pretty amazing, getting kind of up close to some, lions and tigers in particular. They were still in sort of enclosures, but, very, very close, and like flimsy sort of wire cages, not like the Melbourne Zoo where, you're lucky to kind of catch sight of the tiger at the back of the cage.
When you're doing that on the ground research, do you go incognito, or is it sort of, sunglasses and a hat? Here I am, I'm a writer, this is what I'm doing. Can I look?
Yeah, pretty much just incognito, just soaking up the atmosphere and writing lots of notes and taking photos, and yeah.
So by the time you'd finished, and I think you're on a couple of residencies and a couple of fellowships, come back with the fruits of your research and get to work. Is that how? Yeah, that's what I find interesting too is that I understand you've been writing for a while, but The Strays is your first novel. That's right.
Yeah.
And a debut novel which really went gangbusters in terms of the accolades, and particularly winning the Stella Prize. So my question for you is, does that make writing the next book, in this case Wild Abandon, easier because you think, yeah, like I can do it, I can write? Or does it make it harder because you feel the pressure of success?
Probably more the latter. But I think in a way, I think I was kind of lucky that I was just totally kind of caught up in running the bar. Even when I won the Stella Prize, like when I won it, I was doing like 90-hour weeks at the bar. I was so tired I could fall asleep at a red light. I was afraid to drive, so it was hard to kind of get too caught up in all of that, which I think was probably a good thing. So I by the time I kind of got around to being able to write, I was just so desperate to get back to it that the sort of pressure had died down, and I just wanted to do it for myself again more than anything, I think.
When you won the Stella Prize, and of course the ceremonies at that stage were in person, was the night itself really exciting?
Yeah, it was so great. Yeah, I loved it.
Funny, so I'm friends with Sophie Laguna, and she won the Miles Franklin, and you're talking about being exhausted when you're getting these accolades, ring a bell, because I think she just had a baby.
Yeah, I remember that.
And she said she was so tired because she hadn't slept for 12 months or 6 months or however old the baby was. And she said she couldn't even remember her speech when she got up there because she was absolutely exhausted. Sort of that exhausted.
Yeah, I think I remember actually going to see her, or maybe we were even on a panel together. I think after she won the Miles Franklin, and she had the baby that she was like breastfeeding backstage, and then kind of running on trying to do the interview, and then going back after, crying baby, poor thing. Must have been hard for her to juggle all of that.
Yes, yeah, I think it's a very vivid image that I remembered when she'd spoken to me about it. What I want to do is just read the opening paragraph of Wild Abandon. This is it. And I've also listened to the book on audio, and I don't think I can do it justice. Great speaker. But
oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Did you like it? Did you like the speaker?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So it's sort of like a man, low American sort of accent, or American feel to it. I thought it went well. Anyway, this is how he opened the book. On his first night in New York City, he sought out a man to give him something, as travellers and people in end times have long done before him. Some rich, hyper-distilled substance to help him feel at one with the seething, glorious, doomed mass around him, or else to heighten his separateness into an exquisite reverie. Or in other words, on his first night in New York City, Will scored.
Yeah, it's a long-winded way of saying.
Which brings me to my next question. You've described your writing style in this book as Baroque. Can you explain what you mean by Baroque?
Yeah, so it's quite different in tone and style from The Strays, and probably quite different to a lot of contemporary Australian fiction, I would say, which tends to be sort of fairly plain and sort of straightforward in style. And what I really wanted to do with this book was kind of, I guess, because part of what I wanted to write about, there's the sort of literal setting of the private zoo and New York City, but another sort of big theme in the book is really kind of the sort of surrealness of this time that we're living in, and particularly the sort of strangeness of the stage of kind of capitalism, particularly in the sort of overdeveloped West, and American culture is the sort of height of that, just the excess, really. And so what I was sort of trying to do with the prose style was kind of mirror that, so that to have it almost feel at times like almost too much. So there's like strings of kind of adjectives, lots and lots of kind of stuff, food and drugs and art and just lots and lots of kind of the stuff that is surrounding Will in America, and in this kind of incredibly overwhelming, abundant marketplace of things to kind of see and buy and do. And so, yeah, that's why I kind of chose that style, and it is very sort of excessive at times. And then I guess what I did to try and sort of temper that a bit so that it's not too exhausting for the reader is intersperse a lot of dialogue, which is very kind of casual and sort of slangy and easy to read. So there's a kind of sense of, different registers in a way, that kind of high style at times, and then the very, easy kind of contemporary language of the dialogue.
So when we're talking about the Baroque style, was it a style that came to you in your head, or one where you thought, as you've explained here, this is what I want to show, I need a style to reflect that? Or was it a merging of the two?
I think it probably was a merging of wanting to sort of find a style to capture that content, but I think also it was probably also influenced by some of the sort of greats of American literature that I was also reading to sort of draw on for this book, because I was sort of writing about America, and I love a lot of those writers. I guess I'm thinking about people like Saul Bellow and Don DeLillo and who else, like writers that have written about New York City and or other kind of American cities, and there is a sort of, I think, a tradition in American literature that does sort of use that kind of a bit more Baroque or maybe not quite Baroque, but more adventurous and sort of embellished style and kind of probably more in a bit more of a sort of voicey way, but style is very sort of upfront in that kind of tradition.
Did it make it fun? Did it make an adventure to write, or was it really hard to write?
I mean, it was both, but I think I don't know, I think for me as a writer, like one of the main things that sort of keeps me going is what is going to be the technical challenge of the next book. I want to learn something as a writer, or kind of, teach myself something through the process of writing a book. And so that was definitely a challenge to sort of try and maintain that style through this.
So continuing the theme of teaching, and of course you have taught creative writing for a long time. First of all, do you enjoy teaching?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I really, really enjoy it.
What does it for you?
I think so many things. Like at the moment I'm teaching at the Faber Writing Academy, which is quite different. It's a sort of private writing school. It is very different from, say, university tutoring, which I've also done a lot of, in that it's a group of writers who are all working on a novel, and you get to work with them on that kind of project for a whole year. And I find that really satisfying, in that you kind of get to really get to know people's projects, try and kind of really immerse in them, and then work long term in helping them to kind of develop and refine the projects, and then you see them kind of improving and developing as they're going along. That's great. I love just the way that in sort of trying to come up with, say a lesson about dialogue, I'll do all this kind of reading, and then I actually end up learning as much as the students, and then also just just kind of being surrounded by people who are writing and reading is really wonderful, and sort of that sense of kind of community that I get with students.
So it actually impels your writing rather than impeding it.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I think because my background is in studying literature, so I didn't actually come through like a creative writing course myself. I studied literature in my undergrad degree, and then I did a master's in literature. And so I tend to kind of teach in a way where I use a lot of examples and sort of find, say if I'm talking about dialogue, I'll go and find a whole lot of writers that I think do a great job in dialogue, and I'll bring in kind of chunks of examples, and we'll read them together and analyze them. And that's always so kind of inspiring for me to just go back and sort of look at those writers again as well. So I find it really exciting.
Oh, that's fascinating, and it's really buoying too to see your face light up when you talk. I mean, that's the teacher you want, isn't it? The teacher who lights up at the sound of the word. We're almost 8:30, and time goes quickly. I want, please, Emily, your 3 book recommendations.
Yes.
Hand you over to our book clubbers for any of their questions.
Yes, this was very hard for me because I have so many favorite books, but the ones that I chose were In the Skin of a Lion by Michael Ondaatje. Do you want me to spell his name?
We're good. I can sort that.
Yep. The Transit of Venus by Shirley Hazard. Amazing Australian writer. And a sort of more recent one, The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich, who is a First Nations American writer. I think any of her books are really wonderful, but that's one that I read recently. I think it was this one before. The one that she's had out most recently is called The Sentence, I think, and that's meant to be brilliant as well, but I haven't actually read that one. This one was the one before, The Night Watchman.
That's interesting. So what is interesting is that last week on Thursday Book Club, we had Louise Erdrich being recommended by people. So
great.
Good time.
I'm glad that people are reading her. Yeah, I just love her. Like her characters, when you read a book and you just don't want it to end because you're so attached to the characters and you just want them to be your friends. I think she's very good at kind of creating these characters that are, they're complex and they're flawed, but they're just such rich, lovely people that you just want them to stay in your life.
What a great recommendation. So I'll add that to the newsletter next time. So we're going to have 2 great, but I'll put your recommendations in so people can have those. Over to you, everybody on Book Club. I think we can manage unmuting if you'd like to, or just maybe give me a show of hands if you'd like, or even put in the chat line if you'd like to ask a question. We will. So I'm just trying to flip through, or there will be,
or give me your book recommendations. Always keen for new books.
That's a good one. How about is anyone happy for a book recommendation to make?
Yeah, I recently finished reading Dirt Town by Hayley Scrivener.
Oh, yep, good.
Very, very good. Yeah, very good. I'm just actually reading Death at the Belvedere by Sue Williams, and that's a real hoot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, very entertaining, and I just need that right now.
So Emily, just to introduce you, so Barbie Robinson lives in Canberra and she runs Living Arts Canberra and does a lot of interviews with writers.
Oh, great.
Publishing radio station. I think she must work 24 hours a day. So they're very vibrant in Canberra.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Thank you too.
Anybody else got a recommendation or a question? No, no pressure. This is the No Pressure Book Club.
Is that you, Greg? I think Greg put up his hand.
Yeah, hi. And thank you, Emily. That was great. Really enjoyed hearing about that. I've got a son about Will's age who likes going to bars a lot too.
Maybe don't read the first part of their book.
I love that opening section you wrote about Will scoring in very Baroque language. It was beautiful. I hope my son doesn't do that, but you can never tell. I was going to say, Barbie, great that you mentioned Dirt Town, because I'm reading that too.
Wow.
I'm in the middle of that, and it's beautifully written, I've got to say. Incredibly emotional, very emotional. And it's my second missing girl book back to back. The other one I read was Christian White's The Wild Place, which I really liked, but it's totally different, very genre, very edge of the seat, hard to put down. And the other book, I try to mix up my crime with a bit of literary. And this other one, Larissa Morant's After Story, I loved it. It has got a crime at the heart of it, an unsolved, again, a missing child crime, a terrible crime. But the two characters, a mother and a daughter on a literary tour in England, both of them Indigenous women. It's the characters themselves are so complex and brilliant. They really do stay with you. They're great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
okay,
that's
great.
my three anyway.
Yeah, I really want to read that one.
And before
that's lovely. It's lovely.
we leave Greg's also a writer. Greg's novel The Night Whistler was out with text a couple of years ago, or maybe last year only. And
2 years,
2 years, it's time goes quickly. And your new book, The Carnival is Over, is out, I think, next month. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh,
August,
congratulations.
How exciting. Thank you. It is. Yeah.
Excellent. Any more book recommendation before we go to our special raffle? So just speak up actually, because I'm just trying to flick from everybody.
Suzanne, I have a question.
Yes, thank you, Julian.
Our book group is reading The Last Migration by, let me look at her first name, Charlotte McConaughey. And it was also called Migrations, so it seems to have had two names. I'm partway through it and I'd love to know if anyone else has read it, because I have such strange feelings about who this character, this girl is. Has anyone read it? No? Okay. It's about the Arctic tern that migrates each year from Arctic Circle to Antarctica. It flies umpteen thousand kilometres. And this girl's obsession is to track it and follow it. Anyway, I won't go on anymore, but I would, yes, if anyone gets to read it, tell Susanna what you think.
What was your feeling about the character?
She's strange. And, when you read someone that you have very little to connect with, certainly her love of birds, I connect with that, her love of the ocean, but her sense that she's not connected to anything and is almost on a path of self-destruction is it makes for very challenging reading. Anyway, I won't go on. Others want to say something.
Well, that might be a task for the break. So if anyone wants to look up the book, and I'll add that, but at the moment, but just so you've got it in the meantime, Last Migration or Migrations, it might be the different countries it's published in, by Charlotte McConaughey. I think it's McConaughey, is that right? Excellent. I think we've got time for one more comment or question before we start to wrap up. No.
Oh, no, we think we do have one.
We do. Well done. You've got more eagle eyes than me. Who have we got? You tell me.
Katrina.
Hi, Katrina.
It's my first time, so I'm not sure if I should be brave enough to say anything. But
Oh, you should.
Yes, you should.
Right.
Absolutely.
You get a
Emily,
high
I've got about 50 pages left to go on Wild Abandon. I thought I might get it done before 8 o'clock, but I looked up and it was 7:58. I thought I loved the New York stuff in particular. I've been a couple of times. I think the first time was 2011.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
I knew that it's set, so it was just glorious, and the style in which you wrote it just reflected that gloriousness, and I loved it.
Thank you.
My recent read, I just got up to grab it, was something that's not really my cup of tea. Well, I didn't think it was going to be my cup of tea at all.
Oh, yeah.
It's Cirque by Madeline Miller, and a friend were in Dimmicks and just insisted on buying this for me. I was like, oh, this is going to be really heavy going, but it's actually terrific. It's a retelling of a bunch of Greek myths, and was tremendous fun, actually. So that was an unexpected delight. Not the kind of thing I'd normally pick up, but I read it.
Great.
It's interesting that, isn't it? I mean, when what you choose and what's chosen for you, because I do a lot of interviews and a lot of festivals where I'm a facilitator, you get asked to do sessions where the book might have been under the radar, or you haven't made the time to read it, and it really does broaden the spectrum. And like you say, Katrina, it can be just a delightful surprise to come across a book that you may not have picked up.
Yeah.
I've got a last question for you, Emily. Could you please give me a number between 1 and 12?
9.
9, okay.
In King.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, this is the special raffle. So my friend Joanne Fedler has one of those special online raffle things where you have the diagram where you spin the bottle, but I don't. I just have a number, and then at the side where I've got a list of participants, I just find 9, and they're the winner. Because that's what you chose. And very excitingly for Greg Woodland, who asked a question and had a recommendation, you are the winner, Greg.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Suzanne.
So
Wonderful.
If you can send me your address and an email, and courtesy of Alan and Unwin, that your gift will be making its way to you.
Fantastic. Wow.
So look, that's all we've got time for, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you all. Thanks for having
Enjoy.
me.
Emily, Suzanne, everyone.
And fingers crossed for all the shortlistings. And
Thank you.
have an enjoyable week. Thanks again for joining us, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank
It was
you.
very,
Bye.
very good. Thank you.
Thanks.